If someone want to become an architect, so what should be the step-by-step journey process?
To become an architect, it's very important you understand the use case, you build your foundation first. It's very important to build the foundation. Once you have that foundation, you start building from there.
Make the logging strategy secure by design, when you're talking about from an architecture perspective.
So architecturally speaking, a secure by design logging strategy means that you have to have access controls in place so that nobody can, with unauthorized access can access your logs.
So what are the 3 or 4 log sources you want to tune for a day one?
3 most important log sources would be CloudTrail for AWS. Second, DTC flow log.
So now you're reviewing the vendors for risk and compliance. Okay. So what is the first red flag you look for the vendor or cloud architecture? Hi guys, welcome to the session on Coffee with Prab, and today we have a special guest, my friend Mr. Kushal Kumar. He's a cloud security engineer and architect at one of the company. And the best thing about the Mr. Kushal is he spent his great time in designing the AWS Azure setup, which is, talk about the secure by default, fixing all the identity issues and governance. And the best thing about Mr. Kushal is he writing a very simple playbook to the point, no bluff, nothing. To the point, which is required as per the business. And the playbooks talk about a lot of around the developers, which can use to protect the secrets, logs, and data without slowing down their work. Along with that, he also mentors beginners, sharing a real life exercise and checklist that anyone can follow at home. And hey, Kushal, welcome to the show. And let's deep dive into the practical cloud security today.
Hey, Prav. Hello, everyone. My name is Kushal. And definitely, yes, we'll deep dive into what secure by default and design means. So a little bit about myself. So I have almost 10 years of experience in the cloud security and entire cybersecurity space. Actually, it's a very funny story. I started my journey as a log analyst, building log collectors and log parsers for the Siemens SOC solutions and Siemens SOC platforms. And then I did that for almost 2.5 years, then moved to AppSec, did that for almost 2.5 years, worked with developers, fixing their security issues across secure coding and the apps and everything, right? But that was a time when I realized that trend in the market that everybody is moving to the cloud. The app is moving to the cloud. And within my company, there was big push to having the cloud security engineer and architect, all those people, right? So I thought, why not pursue my first AWS certifications? And I did that. Once I did that, I got involved with a lot of people who are designing and reviewing cloud setups and architectures, right? I had a lot of people design as well. And I think from there, I became a cloud security consultant, helping a lot of people in that area. And from there, I think I jumped to cloud security architect when I joined a firm almost 2-3 years back, where my entire role was again designing, reviewing the cloud setups and helping clients have a good security posture.
Okay. That's nice. Today agenda is, I think we are very clear about, right. We're going to discuss about protecting secret logs, or we're talking about the architects and all that. But Kushal, before we jump into that, my first question always for the speaker is that, like, your profile is a security architect and GRC. So if someone want to become an architect, okay, so what should be the step-by-step journey process, if you can spend 5 minutes on that area?
To become an architect, it's very important that you understand the use case, you build your foundation first. Unless you have a good foundation across different layers of security, whether it's IAM, whether it's network security, whether you talk about identity, whether you talk about data protection, unless you have that foundation, it is very difficult to become an architect, because once you're an architect, you have to look at things from different perspective. You're looking at things from 10,000 feet overview, right? And from that point of view, you have to, look at everything that can go wrong or right. You have to look at the functional aspect. You have to look at the security aspects, cost aspect. Resiliently, it should be resilient as well, right? So it's very important to build the foundation. Once you have that foundation, you start building from there. You start reading, go deep dive into the different areas of what interests you. So for me, a simple trick is that whenever you are in puzzle, that what should I focus, how should I focus, just pick a certification, because then you don't have this analysis paralysis thing, right? When you have to search, gather, and find information, and then you have to sit down, and that is too much of effort for a lot of beginners. So I generally just pick up a certification. It could be AWS, Azure, or anything. Start building the foundation from there. Start covering the basics. And once you are comfortable with the initial stage, that you understood what IAM means, data protection means, and all that, then you can deep dive into each resources, Google it, find more information on that area. And once you do that, then the next stage is always comes to how do you practice it. You start your lab, you develop solutions, pick up any solution online. There are the geared resources. For example, AWS has this AWS reference architecture entire page where you can actually look at the reference design and start seeing why this design, what could go wrong, what could go right. So that way you can start building the confidence in your portfolio as a security architect.
So Kushal, sorry to interrupt here. When you said okay, I know certification is definitely required, but as you know, not everyone come with the budget of having a certification.
Right.
See, I want to drive a car. Okay, definitely I need a learning license. Right. I do understand. But learning license is one of the criteria, but we should know the formula of how to operate a car.
Right.
Like when I say I want to become an auditor, we have a journey of starting with 27,001 lead auditor, then we do CISA, learn audit and all that.
Right.
There's a lot of resources are available to become an auditor. There's a lot of resources are available to become a management expert. There's a lot of resources are available about network security engineers and all that. But my question is, when it comes to architect, there are very few resources are there.
Right.
Okay. So how we can basically, how we can basically become an architect from zero, step by step.
So I'll go back to my previous discussion what we're having. Forget about certification, right? Number one thing is to forget about becoming an architect right now. You start at zero, and when you start at zero, you have to build your foundation. You have to build. I'll keep this again and again. I'll say this again and again. Build your foundation. Unless you have foundation on network security, IAM, data protection, everything, and there are tons of resources available online on these different areas, right? So once you do that, once you have built the foundation, then it comes about the practicing of those different areas of your security journey, that's a cloud security journey. Even if you don't do the certification, right, you must have access to the AWS. You cannot say that I cannot access AWS, I cannot do AWS because I don't have money right now. You have to have a practice on AWS instances, because unless you have practice, go and deploy some apps, build some design, you will not have any idea of how cloud security works, right? And pen and paper, you can design everything. You can design anything. But unless you go to the cloud and design actually looking at the reference architecture that you found in AWS architecture reference diagram, because that is a free resource. Unless you do that, you won't start your journey towards cloud security architect. Because designing and understanding the entire reference is very important to become a cloud security architect.
But how did you start it? Like one is that this is how you started your architect part and all that. How did you start it?
So my benefit was that I'm totally speaking to the people who are not in that area of IT security, where they have the comfort of company where they are already heavy deployed in Azure, right? But if you look at my example, I already had companies where they were building already solution in AWS or Azure, right? So I have to look at the internal documents of what exactly they are building, what are the resources that are available internally. So that I can just have a reference. I can learn from those documents how threat model is done.
What is the document called? If someone is want to prepare themselves and all that, one is basically not about the company document, but there should be some reference name to be given.
Right? Most common document that you will come across is threat model documents. Internal threat model documents that you have the architectures, you have the entire process of how to find threats and designing. Then you have DFD diagram documents, right, where there's a data flow diagram which says that how data flows within each services, within each model, right? And those kind of documents you can keep handy whenever you want to learn and practice the architecture in the cloud or somewhere else. Right? Okay, those are documents that you have to refer. So my go-to documents were there. I used to refer those documents, threat model documents, right? And use that as a reference and think about, why this service? Why can't they use some other service, right? And then I Google, okay, I cannot use this service because this service is not scalable. This is not secure, right? And then I think in that process. And then when that process comes into your thinking, you start, pivot towards designing. Now, that how to design this, right? You started understand that, okay, this design will work with this way or this service will fit this way. And that is entire journey that began for me, because you have to have that reference knowledge. You must have looked at a lot of architectures before you start designing and implementing it. And that is the entire process.
Okay. So Kushal, it's a very interesting question I want to ask you. As a cloud security architect, okay, how do you explain your job to someone outside the tech? Like, I don't know about nothing, So if I want to know what is the role of Kushal, I cannot say, you take a flight every day to the cloud and
Right.
from there you basically manage everything. So as a cloud security architect, how do you explain your job, a day in a life of a Kushal?
So I'll come to an example. This is like 10 years back example, right? So I was doing a secure code review and I found this very interesting book called Head First Java. I know if you heard of it or not. And this book is amazing for Java developers. And I just, because since I was doing secure code review, I need to know the Java application. So there was a very important concept that was explained how to design a class in Java. That huge concept, you have a class and everything. And that takes example of how you can consider class as a blueprint, right? Blueprint of designing something. When you design, you have a blueprint, you can then copy that blueprint to multiple places. And then, so I always steal that concept and put it in my perspective and say that when you talk about cloud security architect, assume someone is designing a property, right? Building an entire mall or anything. And the first thing that you do when you do that is design a blueprint of how that entire thing would look like, right? And then you start looking at the gates, windows, you start adding fire extinguishers, exit plans and everything, right? The similar way, the cloud security architect is similar way we do that same thing in the cloud. The only thing difference is that there is no windows, there is no doors. There are services in the cloud. There are exit plans, inbound traffic, outbound traffics. How do you want to secure that? How each services that you deploy, how to secure that? How in case of disaster, what exactly do you do to mitigate those disaster plans? So everything that you design is the cloud. And that is how I explain to anyone.
So Kushal, help me with this. Can you just explain me with one example? Let's take one use case. Today we went to the office and we got this requirement, and how the cloud security architect share his viewpoint on that. Is it possible? Can you just share that viewpoint so it is easier for the audience to understand the role of a cloud security architect?
Yeah. So just to give a brief about how this would happen. So suppose I went for a job today and a business requirement comes in.
Can you just take an example of business requirement?
A business requirement as in there's an app that needs to be developed, a solution that needs to be developed for the market, which is like an e-commerce application, and it will collect the username and passwords and the phone numbers, emails of the user. It will have the merchandise stored somewhere else so that people can look at the photos. And a simple way up, simple solutions. Now the requirement is, this is the requirement. The way you look at that is, how do I pick my services so that I fit these requirements in the cloud, right? So you pick, for example, when you say I have to store my database, I have to store my PIs and everything. So you think about, okay, I need to have a database. Then you think about, okay, there are some products or services that I need to expose to the outer world. For example, photos, and so I cannot have my internal database exposed out to the public, right? Then I choose a file storage service such as S3 in the AWS, which you can, directly, customers can talk to directly and fetch information from there, right? Then who would handle the entire algorithm? How would the entire transaction happen? Then you choose, okay, should I pick Lambda services, which is functional-less services, or should I go for a server services, which is EC2 instances or Azure and Azure instances? Then comes, okay, now how do I decide? Then comes, do I require is my entire transaction that is going to happen last for a longer time? So I need to maintain the session. I need to store the session. Or is it very quick, short burst transaction or communication that is going to happen from the outside to inside of the cloud, right? Then you choose, okay, it's very short term, not lasting very long. Let's choose serverless app. So you have Lambda services. Now you design this application. Okay. Now comes the API. How would someone access my service? Okay. Then we have an APIs. You design the APIs, right? You ask the developer to design the APIs. Now how does that API will talk to my services? There could be flooding of APIs. A lot of people will talk to my APIs. Now my web app or serverless app will shut down, right? Will be DOSed, for example. Then you think, okay, let's put an API gateway that will handle my traffic, that will handle all the incoming and inbound requests. And when you move to the AWS, the advantage is that it can scale very efficiently. So if you do an API gateway, it scales very quickly and very efficiently. That will handle my traffic. That will route the traffic to my internal services. And then my app that I connected, that I have EC2 instance or Lambda services, talk to my DB database, fetch the information, and pull that information. And someone is trying to log in, then yes, they will be authenticated via database. Or someone is trying to access the merchandise, then the app layer would migrate, and navigate them to the S3 bucket where they'll get the link and then they'll access the entire merchandise and everything services, right? So this is the entire flow of how things works in when you start designing the architecture. So you have
Okay.
to
And
think
what is the
from
document called where we document all these things?
architecture diagrams is a normal document that
Okay.
depending on business, what exactly is the business use case. We name that business use case and business, and then we start with architecture diagram.
Okay. So do you use any tool to design these diagrams and all that?
So there is very common tool, the draw.io, that is available online.
Which one?
Draw.io.
Okay.
Right. So that is very handy tool that you can actually started drawing any architecture that you like. That is one of the famous tools that I use. If there's a local tool as well, something called threat model by Microsoft, Stride. So
But that is for threat modeling, yeah.
no, I'm talking about the tool.
Vision.
No, not Vision. Threat. I forgot the tool name. It's Microsoft tool that helps you design the architecture, and then you can do the threat model on that. There's also one called Threat Dragon by Wasp that helps you design the architect. So these are some of the tools that you can use to design the architect in the cloud or anywhere.
Because I will be your one of the first student who noting down all the points. Because something for me also.
It's very handy, and in fact, not just diagram. You can also design the data flows. Data flows are very different from the diagram. You just design the data flows. Like for example, you have 3 components talking to each other. Then you design the entire flow of data. How would each component talk? What is 1? What is 2? What is 3? What is the first communication, second communication, third communication? All those things. How data flows. So those are the things you can draw.
Okay. Kushal, this is a non-technical question I want to ask you, continuation of this question. As a security architect, when we're talking about what are the important characteristics an architect need to be have when he designing this entire process flow diagram?
As a
non-technical like patience or calm mind or so. What do you think? The mistakes that I'm sure no one is perfect, right, Kushal? When you involved in first project or sometime you involved in some of the projects, things go bad. Things doesn't go as per plan.
Right.
So how do you share any kind of a failure journey, or do you want to share something which can be useful for the aspiring architect who watching this podcast and they take from this particular podcast?
Right. So architect job is not easy, I would say. It is too much of pressure that comes from the business. Once you take up on that job, it's very important to understand that you have to have patience to design architect. You have to think of multiple solutions. Is one solution does not fit everything. You cannot have a single solution and like replicate all the same solution across different services and different business units. Now, each business unit has a different requirement. Now, it is very important to understand the business requirement. Unless you understand what exactly they want, you cannot design an architect. You cannot design a solution, right? The first important point is understand the business requirement. If you're first time a beginner, understand what exactly the business wants, right? Second thing is you have to understand from perspective that what I'm trying to put forward, can it be secure enough? Can that handle the security that might impact the business, right? And when I talk about business, you have to understand that it's not just the losing data. When business lose data, you lose reputation, you lose customer trust, you lose the brand, exactly. So you have to keep that in mind every time you design something. You have to keep in mind, okay, if I'm putting this out there, can this be compromised? What can go wrong with this, right? That is the second point. Third point is that you have to understand the trade-off between cost of putting that security control and cost of fixing it. Business would say, okay, why should I fix? Why should I put this control? And you have to come with a justification that because this control will help you save millions. Otherwise, you have to, spend more millions to, get that, cover that breach or cover that misconfiguration, you cover that impact, right? So you have to have that mentality. And fourth is that don't expect that your first diagram will be perfect. You will always explore, you will always experiment, you will do something, then business will say, no, I want this. And there's always changing needs for the business. So when businesses say, no, I want this, I want to be cost effective, but this cannot scale. I want to be multi-cloud. Okay, I want to be more resilient. This is not going to happen. So you have to be prepared with that mindset that the first diagram is never going to be perfect. You will always experiment. You will always explore new solutions and everything. You cannot have everything in your mind. You have to Google. You have to use the online platforms available. That you have to look at the reference architecture to come up with ideas. Okay, how can I solve this? You cannot actually remember everything. It's impossible to remember the entire architectures and everything. You have to take example of the Google and learn from it. And that is the 4-5 points I think I said.
Excellent. So Kushal, I want to proceed with the next important thing, which is talking about here is, can you share Can you share something in an early design review that made you realize the architecture decisions can make or break security?
I'll go back to example again. One of my reviews that I did, early reviews that I did in probably 2019, 18, 19 that I did this review. And initially I was very overwhelmed with the design because I was just started my journey in cloud security. So when I used to get design, it was very much overwhelming. I used to, where should I start? Then slowly and steadily, I started to learn that, okay, I need to look at that instead of focusing on like getting overwhelmed by entire design. After I think a dozens of review, I started noticing a pattern that pattern looks like this. Back in the day, S3 buckets were by default public, but now it is by default private. So when I started doing, a lot of people, the designs would include open first. Second, I see, okay, have you enabled CloudTrail? CloudTrail, which is when I was doing the AWS cloud, CloudTrail. The CloudTrail is one of the logging things that you enable while, because it logs all the audit activities that goes inside the cloud, right? So have you enabled CloudTrail? Have you enabled the RDS encryption? Because by default, when you create the database, it is not encrypted by default. You have to have the encryption in place. So have you enabled that? And the answer was no, I did not. And fourth, this is always common, that why are you using credentials instead of managed services, managed roles in AWS? Why are you not using or leveraging that? And these were some of the common findings that I used to see across, and these could have some real world consequences, right? These are the architecture design and mistake that. And this is when I review architectures. We're not designing architectures. And these could have some real world consequences, right? So S3 bucket open, and if you're storing data there, you could, like, it's a breach of your data, right? It's the entire breach. You don't have your encryption in place for the RDS. Someone could, if you have some open ports or open IP, then they could steal the data, or they could steal the snapshots of your instances of RDS instances. And when you don't use the IAM permissions, and we see, is very common nowadays to see the secrets being leaked, and if you are using secrets to access the services, you not.
And those who are new to this audience might be there will be some people will be there. Sorry to interrupt here.
Yeah.
What do you mean a secret?
So I'll come to that point. Let me finish the thought, and then I'll come to that point. So like I was talking about secrets, and then that is all over the place. So it is very important to use the AWS and IAM role, IAM access, IAM managed roles that can access that can help you access the services in the cloud, right? So as I mentioned, like, these breaches, it's not just data loss, it's reputation loss, trust lost, brand loss. Sometimes entire business goes away because of data breaches, and these are some of the mistakes I think every architecture or business should avoid. So if someone highlights it, they should immediately work upon it. And coming to the secrets, yes. So secrets are basically something that can help you access a platform. For example, consider your phone as well. You have whatever password that you have phone have. It's a secret.
Okay.
So the problem is not the secret. Problem is that how do you manage the secrets? I can have the secrets anywhere, right? I can have the secrets in my local desktop, local file. But it doesn't mean anything. I mean, who is going to access my local desktop or local? It's not connected to internet. So I don't have problem keeping secrets. What matters is that how do you manage it? How do you manage that so that it does not get leaked to the external world? It does not get in hands of unauthorized people who does not have access to your platform, have access to the services that you're using. So then you come with the secret management platforms, and then you store the secrets in those platforms, and then so that you make sure that you do not commit the secrets in the GitHub repository, and then you use the secret managers to retrieve the secrets and fetch the secrets and do all the 9 yards. Yeah.
So we can see like that secrets are basically the most important element you have in the log.
Right. Not just in the log, but entire IT services. Secrets are very important. I'm not just talking about the cloud. It could be on-prem, it could be hybrid, it could be anywhere. Local databases. I'm using. Take for example, I have a web app. Right, a web app has an API key. That's a secret. API key that is personal to you is a secret. If I leak that API key, that's the problem. That's a problem that someone else can access my data. Now, you have database credentials. That's a secret. I do not want someone else to access my database. Sometimes people use hashing and use paper and salt, right? Paper as a random algorithm, and then use that thing and use that to hash it and then store that in a secret manager. And I don't want to reveal that information because that will impact my hashed files or credentials, whatever we have. So you could talk about secrets as in certificate manager. You use certificates. Right? Public certificate is my secret. I cannot just give my private certificate to anyone because if you see, I'll take example. Again, you can do SSH with credentials. You can also do SSH certificates. Right?
True.
Use certificates.
Authentication,
Mutual
passport authentication. Yeah.
MTLS is there, right? So if I give my certificates to anyone, I mean, they could access my information, right? That is what the secrets are, and that is why you need to have the secret manager in place.
And when it comes to when you're starting a new project, how do you choose the secret management pattern? We have a built-in vault or versus third party. If you're looking from without over complexity and all that, so how, as a security architect, how we choose that?
I frame this question in a different way. Lot of mature companies nowadays. Since I have been involved with more mature companies than startups. When I talk about mature companies, I'm talking about the process, the policies they already have in place, right? And by that process or policies, they already define what exactly the secret management tools they are already using. So they say that must use secret manager. If you must use AWS secret manager, must use a HashiCorp Vault, because that is the two things the entire organization might be using. Now, you don't have a choice to suggest some other third party when you're designing an architect, right? You have to say that, okay, you are in AWS cloud, use the AWS Secret Manager. You are in Azure, use the Azure Key Vault. You are in hybrid, use the HashiCorp Vault, which is a third party solution. But having said that, when you have to choose between secret manager or third party services or in native services in the cloud, there are 3 to 4 things that you need to consider. You have to think about the scalability, how well the secrets tool that I'm using will scale according to my business. You have to talk about obviously security, because security, you have to think about it. The third thing is you have to think about how simple it is to use the secret, because I don't want my developers or people to be trained to use a secret manager, because that's an overhead. They should be knowing how to use a secret manager and secret tools that whatever I'm using. And then comes a cost effective, how much cost that it costs. For example, every secret manager will tie the cost in terms of how many API calls that you make to the platform. So you get and write. You either get a secret, you write a secret, and then I think AWS has something 10,000 calls per something. I don't remember exactly the cost. So that are the 4 factors you have to consider whenever you choose a secret manager. But if you're a small scale organization, not very big, having one AWS account, it's very, very obvious to go for a secret manager if you're an AWS, because first of all, it's very simple to use. Second, you don't have to invent something. Engineering overhead is not there. And then since your entire services on AWS, it is very tightly coupled with all the services. Similar goes for Azure. If you are in Azure, use Azure Key Vault, because it's tightly coupled with all the services that is already there in the Azure. But then don't make this mistake of having your platform multi-platform. For example, you have service in Azure and AWS, and then using AWS Secret Manager as your go-to secret manager. Because the problem which you can run is, again, we have to you design the architecture in such a way that now AWS services has to authenticate to AWS. Now it has to authenticate to the secret manager, then pull the secret, and those adds extra burden to your entire data and data flows, right? Suppose my platform that is in AWS is able to access secret manager, but the platform in Azure that is not able to access the secret manager that is in AWS. Now that becomes a problem, because I'm able to access it, but my other team is not able to access it. Now there's a data loss, time loss, all this business impact that's going to happen. So in such cases, when you have hybrid environment, or when you're looking at the multiple cloud, multi accounts, multi region, then it's better to go for third party solutions such as HashiCorp Vault. That can give you a centralized platform. Also, then it comes about the governance part as well. You have to have central governance. Then HashiCorp Vault, go for it. It can have you central governance. It is if it doesn't work, it won't work for everybody. It works for everybody. You don't have to figure out that why it is not working for AWS and my other team is not getting the chance to interact with the secret manager. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would recommend.
And do you follow any kind of a design principle keeping secrets from leaking into code repository in the first place? Do we follow any design principle in place, secure design principles?
When you talk about leaking secrets in the code, yes, we do recommend developers to do first of all. So in terms of designing, what you can recommend is that first of all, never store your secrets in the secret plain text. You always have to have a secret manager in place. Right? Use, if possible, use tools. We ask developers to use tools such as pre-commit hooks are there in that you can install in your IDEs. So moment you start adding secrets, or moment you start pushing secrets, it will detect and warn you that there's a secret in the code base. You also go for secret scanning. So a lot of SCM platform, which is GitHub, GitLab, they do provide this feature of secret scanning. You can also, whenever you push something, it will flag it, and then it will come as a risk, and then you have to merge it, fix it, and then merge it. Apart from that, I would say there are a lot of open source tools as well. For example, Git leaks is there, Tool is there, Git secret is there, that can help you identify secrets in the code base. Right. But from a design perspective, architecturally speaking, it is always a secret manager. Don't store anything anywhere else. Always use a second principle that we use is that use IAM principles wherever possible. IAM service managed roles. Either your EC2 instance is accessing the database, define a role, add that role to the EC2 instance, and let that EC2 instance connect to the database. No secrets, no credentials that are being used. So that is the second design principle that we generally talk about. And third is always logging and monitoring is there. Whenever something being accessed, your secret manager being accessed, someone is using something, unauthorized access is there, then you always have to have logs so that you understand who, where, and what for the logs, right? So those three, coupled together works very as a first, second, and third line of defenses. Right? So
that's a great, Kushal. Kushal, actually, as we're talking about a lot of things around secret management and all that, but one thing we are missing in the cloud is logging,
right?
Because that help you to improve all the security controls and posture of the cloud.
Right.
So, what make the logging strategy secure by design? When you're talking about from an architecture perspective, what should be a logging strategy? Yeah.
So I'll again go back to one of my journeys. I think when I came across the security log the first time was when I started my first job. When I started as a log analyst, that was the first time I started looking at the logs and understood what logs meant. I understood that every device whether it's WAF, IPS, IDS, firewall, every device emits some kind of logs, and the logs are nothing but any event that happens in those devices. In those devices are captured in the form of logs. Could be system logs, there could be security logs, and all those things. Right? And that is the time when I understood the importance of logs, what the security logs meant, and what a goldmine of security logs are for anybody, for not just for the company. Because in security investigation, the first thing that you go for is logs, right? And so when logs are gold mine for anyone, you want to have it stored securely. You want to have that logs maintained for a long time so that you can run your analysis, investigations, even after years of breaches that happens. So architecturally speaking, a secure by design logging strategy means that you have to have access controls in place so that nobody can, with unauthorized access can access your logs without permissions. You have to have, security controls built around such that you have to have your logs encrypted. You cannot have it sitting in a plain text somewhere without any encryption. You have to have the logs integrity maintained so that if someone can modify the log, that someone did make a mistake in modifying the logs or someone tampered the logs. And finally, you look at the compliance aspect to it, right? Because a lot of industry wants the logs to be retained for so many long, like for example, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years sometimes. And that you have, and those are some of the factors that I look when you talk about secure design, is to have encryption, access control, you have integrity, you have compliance. 3 to 4 aspects that you need to look at when I talk about secure by design logging strategy.
That's great. And when it comes to the let's take example, Kushal, you're working for the company who are having a very limited budget,
right?
And as you know, when it comes to SIM, Splunk, and all that, the costing is done based on the number of usage, the log storage, and all that. And when it comes to the log management, our priority is quality over the quantity. So if budget is tight and you want to log, so what are the 3 or 4 log sources you want to tune for a day one, or you think, okay, these are things which we cannot avoid?
So this is something that I always tell someone who is planning to move to the cloud, or someone is planning to move their services to the cloud. 3 most important log sources would be CloudTrail for AWS. For Azure, it would be Activity Log, because these logs captures all the audit events that that goes inside your AWS environment. Who's talking to whom? What database? What services are talking to each other? And all those things. Right? Audit logs are there. Second, at the network level, you must enable the VPC flow log. In AWS, it's VPC flow log, and Azure, it's called VNet flow logs, because that will help you understand who is going in and out of network, inbound traffic, outbound traffic, what port, what destinations, what source IP, what source port, right? Someone who's accessing those services is there. Those logs will be very important. And finally, someone who is moving to the cloud, I would recommend going for an AWS config. If in AWS config, in Azure, it's called policy, AWS policy, something like that, because that will help you track the changes to your services. For example, I have a EC2 instance in the cloud, and there's a security group configured for a specific IP group that only that specific IP can access my EC2 instance. But someone goes and changes that to a 0.0.0.0, which is open to the internet. Now, how do I track it? Who did it? When it was done? Right? So then you have AWS config to detect that drift in your configurations. When it was done, who did it? So these are the three things that I would always ask someone to enable it when they are moving to the logs cloud.
That's great. And the interesting part is talk about the VPC and all that, because I think the major breach happened in VPC where we have a blast attacks and all that, right?
Right.
And I believe we should focus on that from micro-segmentation perspective.
Right.
And how do you design a log storage, a cost-effective, tamper-proof, and easy for future analysts for search?
One of the biggest thing about log storage is that logs can get the volume of the logs that you get can shoot very, very fast. At one moment, you might have 10 logs, another moment, you might have 10,000 logs. And that can take up your storage very fast. And if you are having in on-premise services, you are storing logs, then good luck with adding more and more storage to your entire server stack. So the best way to store the logs in the cloud, and by default, a lot of, for example, I'm talking about CloudTrail logs. They are by default get stored in S3 bucket. The best storage, when you talk about the cost effectiveness, the best way to look at the tier architecture, tier storage. So where there's a concept called hot storage, and then there are cold storage in the cloud. Hot storage are the places where you store the most recent logs, most live logs. So you may choose to store 7 days to 30 days logs in your hot storage. And then the moment the logs becomes older, then you start moving them to archive tier, the cold tier where they are stored. Because it helps in cost effectiveness, because now where you're paying like 1x in your hot logs, now you're paying half of that amount full storage. So you're reducing the cost by moving the logs into their archive storage and the cold tier storage. So that is the cost effectiveness. Second, what did you mention? Second, about it?
Tamper-proof.
Yeah, tamper-proof. So I think we already discussed about logging strategy that before this call. Tamper-proof is all about someone could not modify my logs. Someone could not modify the integrity of my logs. Then again, if you're storing the logs in a particular storage, then you have to make sure that nobody has access to the logs, right? You have to have, IAM principles designed in such a way that only a given user or a given role can access that logs, and no other user can access the log. Only a given role could modify the logs, or only these particular service can write the logs in that folder, or fetch the logs from that folder. Then you have to have very strict and tight controls around the accesses and the encryption and everything. And finally, you may talk about how easy it is to search, right? Because when you have so much of logs, it's very difficult to search the incidents and everything, right? When I was dealing with loggings in my previous roles in my first year, I used to see two types of logs. One is structured and unstructured. And since I was creating a parser, it was so difficult to build a parser on non-structured logs than a structured logs. Because in non-structured logs, IP is going to be somewhere else. But in second line, it will be somewhere else. For example, if you consider 1, 2, 3, 4 places, in the first log, IP address might be your first place, but in the second log, you have IP address at the fourth place. Now, when you have such a disproportionate strategy or the structure, then it gets very difficult to not just parse it, to search it as well. How do I? Because a lot of times you search not by IP address, sometimes you search by, okay, I want to see the IP address. There's the first column. What is the first column? And you fetch all the IP address from the first column or the second column, right? Sometimes very difficult. So it's very important to have a structured format. Log should be either in JSON. Most of the time I have deal with is either in CSV format, which is comma separated value format. Logs are stored in the structured format. Once you have the log stored in the structured format, it becomes easier to search and then you could do analysis on those formatting. So yeah, those are the three aspects that I would think when it comes to designing a secure or resilient architecture flows.
That's great. And one thing I like about that, the integration part you said about, na, like integrations and limiting privilege. That something
Right.
is basically a very good important point. And with the continuation of the question, this is something different from that. So Kushal, when you working as an architect, there will be a lot of vendors with whom you want to involve because a lot of
Right.
integrations there. So now you're now reviewing the vendors for risk and compliance. Okay. So what is the first red flag you look for the vendor cloud architecture if you're planning to integrate the external to the internal?
When we talk about the vendors, I mean, the work for any company, the data is very important. Data is a gold mine for any company. And whenever we talk to a vendor, whenever we want to integrate with some vendor, there is some data exchange that is going to happen. I'm going to send my data to the vendor for analytics purposes, for generating some sort of, because they are providing some services that I want, and they want some logs, they want some information to be sent out. So every security controls that we review is all about data, all around what data controls, what security controls you have around my data, right? And the very first flag that we look is, okay, show me your security controls around your data. Is my data encrypted at rest? How do we are protecting my data? Who have access to my data? Are you logging and monitoring every activity that is going back and forth to my the services that you're holding data to? And those are the first red flag that I always see. That show me the log, show me the architecture diagram. In fact, in one use case that I remember, there was this. I won't take the vendor name, but I saw that they have like architecture. One as they have two VPCs in the cloud. One is test. One you have prod VPC, and other is non-prod VPC. And what they did was they connected the prod VPC to non-prod VPC, and they are extending the data from there. I was like, what? What are you doing in the world? How would I know that my data is secure if you are using this architecture, right? And those are those are blunders. Those architectures should not exist. I mean, as part of, I have made policies and process in the past. I always say that VPC's peering should not be enabled. We should not have, this is something called Chinese wall model. And you separate the production and non-production data. You have the segmentation in place, right? So yeah, those are the factors that I always look at.
And anything else you would like to add from non-technical perspective?
Could you repeat the first question because I forgot what was the first question?
So I said about when you're assessing the vendor for architect, what are the red flag? Right. Anything which is basically add from a non-technical perspective, we can add.
Yeah, we can add. So we look at the compliance perspective as well. So we look at a lot of SOC 2 documents, SOC 2 type 2 documents, which is very compliance focused, non-tech documents, right? And it will have all the rule books that I follow. So for example, a SOC 2 documents is just a rule book. The company says, okay, I have this rule book, I follow this rule. These are the rule books, and I follow these rule books. Whatever the book says, I follow it. And that is a SOC 2 document, but then SOC 2 compliant company. But then how do I make sure that you are SOC 2 compliant? You are following all those rules. Then the company says, okay, I'm going to invite some inspector or some auditor, and that will review that what I have implemented and what this SOC 2 rulebook says is a match. And the auditor finds that, okay, these are match, then it gives a certificate. You are SOC 2 compliant now. And that is what we look for, right? And you look for all the SOC 2 documents, what are the controls they are following, where's my data, the structure, the infrastructure, everything that we look at. And that's for non-technical people.
Okay. And Kushal, if you want to translate architecture findings into the GRC language and that non-technical manager understands, so how do you follow that? It means you need to translate your findings of architecture into the GRC so that your manager is a GRC guy. We cannot go to them and explain about them non-repudiation, threat modelings and all that. How do you, what is the skill set you need to have to translate that GRC language into non-technical language? Yeah.
So it's for any
finding into GRC language. Yes.
Yeah, it's for any manager. I think it comes down to the business impact. Like if you're not adding a business impact to the findings, there is no point. I could say, okay, let's take an example. I could say MD5 is being used. MD5 as a hashing algorithm being used in particular storage services. But then business will say, okay, what is the risk? And you just gave me the finding. What exactly should I do with it? What's the business impact? Just having an MD5 in place. I know MD5 is a old algorithm not being used. It's an obsolete algorithm. But what do I do with it? How does it affect my business? Then you say, okay, MD5 is being used to hash the PI data in your environment. That then there's a business impact. Now my customer data is being impacted. If somebody could leak my customer data, I could easily dehash the MD5. Could easily be done, right? But if you say no, we are using MD5 to just to check the checksum, do the checksum of a file, then say that's not a business risk. That's just a checksum that you're just validating the integrity of the file, right? So it is very important that you not just say that, okay, this is the risk, but you also highlight that this impact. Take another example. For example, if I say in the cloud, if I say my S3 bucket is open, but that does not give you a risk, that is just a misconfiguration. Okay, my S3 bucket could be open, but what is the context? I could be sharing some PDF file to the customer, which is important. That does not translate to a risk. Then you have to say, okay, S3 bucket is open. It has been observed that S3 bucket is open, which could allow unauthorized access or an attacker to have unauthorized access to the S3 bucket to leak the confidential information from the storage. Now that's an impact. Now that's a business impact. Now business will understand, okay, this is the impact that I'm going to have if this happens. If this threat is realized, this is the impact that I'm going to happen. This is, and then, that is how you translate the normal risk to a business risk. And that is what all the business cares about. What is the impact?
Okay. And when you're talking about the requirement of implementation of architecture and all that, when talking about the checklist, checklist to make the cloud design safer without buying any new tool. So what is a not 30 but 5 checklist or 10 checklists which we need to follow when you designing the cloud security architecture?
3 to 4 checklists that I follow is to look at areas whenever I design or whenever I review or design the architecture. First is the IAM controls, because nowadays IAM is becoming the first line of defense. A lot of breaches happens because of the misconfigured IAM controls, misconfigured roles, over permission roles. And that is, I think, becoming the first line of defense where you stop the breach from happening. So first thing is I always look at IAM controls, what exactly your IAM controls are designed, how it exactly works, how it should work. Second thing, I look at the network security part, your security groups or NACL, what do you call? I would say I would look at the unused ports, open ports to the internet. I don't want any non-required non-ports to be part of that group. And until unless it is some internal ports that is required to communicate with internal services, remove it. I don't want it. You should audit that first. That is second thing you audit after I. Third thing that you look at, the data's encryptions, right? So in the end, it is the data that is going to be affected, right? And you look at how my data is encrypted at rest. You look at how my data is encrypted at motion, so that there could be no eavesdropping of data. Someone could steal my database, so they should not be able to decrypt my information from the database. That is the third thing I look at.
Okay.
Fourth thing I look at, or I recommend to look at, is the logging and monitoring. No matter how do you arrange all these things, how do you configure all these things, but then if you do not know how, what, and why, what, when, and who, then you don't know, you do not understand how something happened. And like I mentioned, the three important cloud events that you should configure: CloudTrail, VPC Flow, and AWS config, right? Because it's very important to know who access what. And if without that view, you feel misdirected. You run like a headless chicken of doing what is going wrong, or how did it happen, who did it. So those fourth that, and finally, if possible, if you have the budget, then go for a secret manager. You use the cloud services. You look at the KMS services from the key management services in the cloud. You look at the secret manager to store your secrets and keys. Those are the 4 or 5 checkpoints, checklists that I would say you look at.
That's great, Kushal. Kushal, thank you so much. It was really a great insight session, and I'm sure from this particular podcast, people literally find a lot of insights and they can apply that in the best practices.
I'm glad that to be part of this. Thank you for hosting me, and speaking with the legend. It's always
now, speaking with you as a legend also is a big thing, because you're doing a great job. And I always, this is like a recording session, which is like on which I can ask many things. So I want to take I want to speak on behalf of the subscribers who are watching this podcast. If I disturb you again, can I disturb you again for another new topic on security architecture?
Sure. I would love to come to your
thanks. Thanks, Kushal. And those who are watching this podcast, do let me know in the comment box, what is a new topic we can discuss on the architecture side with Kushal. And I'm sure Kushal will always welcome those topics, and we can we can discuss about those key pointers in our next podcast. But thank you, Kushal bhai. Thank you for taking out the time for this particular session. And we're really, really grateful for the experts, wisdom, thoughts, insights that you shared in the session.
Thank you, Pav, and thank you everyone for inviting. First of all, I would like to be grateful for you to invite me in this podcast. Right? It's glad to share so much information with you and with the audience. So yeah, thank you for that.
Same here, Kushal. And for me, I got a lot of information insights. I made a lot of notes. So I'll bug you. And can I share your LinkedIn profile in description box? If
Sure,
someone want
sure,
to reach out to you, they can directly reach out to you for the things.
sure. No problem at all.
Thanks, Kushal. And this is all from our side team. Do let me know how do you find this podcast. And if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. Thank you so much. Good day. Bye.
All right.